Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to give people a few minutes to join the room. If you want, you can write in the webinar chat where you're calling in from. Hello, everyone. Amazing. From Boston, Cleveland, Los Angeles. Amazing. So as we do this webinar today, feel free to chat with everyone. Select everyone instead of just host and panelists. That way, everyone can see your responses and we can have a great discussion. So without further ado, we're going to slowly get started. So welcome to today's Tigerhall webinar. Our session features Stacey Taylor, who is Vice President, Implementation and Change at Visa, and a member of the ECLC, a global network of senior transformation leaders. Today's topic, how Visa successfully activated AI across a global workforce. Stacey, you can take it away.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Julianne, for that introduction. And I'm very happy to be here and to share with you our story at Visa. And just to kind of set a little bit of context before we get into the content, we were asked by our CEO and our head of technology to basically set up Visa as a leader in Gen AI. And as a company, we've already have been a leader in AI. So this was like a natural progression for us. But that was the challenge that we were faced. And then we were asked in the enterprise transformation office to basically make this happen and incubate it. So myself and my team, we spent somewhere between 18 and 20 months basically activating Gen AI for the entire company, and then we started to integrate it into more of our business as usual. And we're really pleased with and proud as a company with where we are today with our Gen AI adoption, and also being recognized by Fortune magazine and in their audit as being number 2 in terms of the company most ready to monopolize and take advantage of AI, both internally and for commercial solutions. So, with that, what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about our adoption journey, but where I'm going to spend most of my time is actually in how we overcame the barriers, because that's what I hear from a lot of people who are venturing into Gen AI activation, that they face a lot of barriers, and we did as well. So, we'll definitely share with you how we address those issues. And then I'll close with a little bit of a teaser in terms of how we're looking at our next frontier, which is agentic. But before we dive into adoption, I wanted just to start with a poll just to kind of get a sense of where people are on the journey. So, Julianne, can you pop up that first poll? I'm just curious if you guys can share, where are you in your organization today in terms of your Gen AI adoption journey?
We'll give people just a few more minutes to answer, and then I'll show the responses. Stacey, do you happen to see the results, or I can talk about the results?
Yeah, if you could just walk through those results, that would be great. Right now, I can't see them because I'm in the full screen mode.
Okay, perfect. So in terms of the answers that we got, we have 13%, sorry, who are just exploring. We have 58% who is piloting with small teams, 28% scaling across functions, and 1% who is mature and expanding to agentic workflows.
Oh, excellent on that 1%. We're buddies. All right. Well, that's great to know that there are quite a few people on the call who are kind of already embarking on the journey and piloting, which means you've started to identify those barriers and probably starting to see those. So that's fantastic to know, especially later when we're maybe going through conversation and Q&A. Would love to hear from other people about how they're addressing some of the barriers that they're seeing. But let's dive in first into the adoption and how we thought about how we approached our journey. So from the very, very beginning, and I want to take us back to for Visa, our beginning is in July of 2023. So just to give you a context of how long we've been on this journey. And like I said, we were tasked by our CEO and our head of technology to basically have us be a leader in Gen AI. But what that really meant for us was that they wanted to see within the organization a greater amount of productivity and creativity, more value for clients. So we knew right from the onset, and even in those early pilots, that that what we're doing here is basically a cultural transformation. This is about completely rethinking the way a workforce needs to think and work, and that this was not a regular tool deployment. So from the very beginning, we didn't approach this like you would a normal tool deployment, like even a vast like ERP change, like if you're doing a full deployment of moving from SAP to Oracle, let's say, which is a massive transformation for a company. We didn't approach it that way. We really focused more on the human side and the new ways of working and new ways of thinking. And and here's how we kind of saw our journey and continue to see our journey in terms of the ways of working. So eventually what we're trying to get to is full integration, where basically Gen AI is just fully part of our culture. It's completely woven into the way we operate and we work. We're not there yet. We still think we're some years away from that. And just like maybe any other kind of digital transformation, like an agile transformation, or even if you go back, for those of us who have been around long enough, like even just the onset of moving to like having the internet or using Google and things like that. These are massive transformations that take 3, 5, 7 years. So we're in our third year. And where we kind of assess we are today is kind of at that early stages of transformation, where we're just now really embedding Gen AI into our process flows and starting to kind of invent the way we work in the world of AI. But knowing that most of you on the call, right, are in that early stage, you're just trying to figure out that adoption, you're doing some experimentation. I'm going to focus more on how we kind of got through that first 2 years of the journey. So in our first year, so again, we started in July of 2023. Our fiscal year starts in October. So at the beginning of fiscal 24, we were given quite an ambitious OKR, as you can see here from our CEO. And then that OKR has continued to get more ambitious and aggressive. So fiscal 25 was more ambitious than what you see here, and fiscal 26 has continued to be even more ambitious. And I'll talk about that when we get to the agentic section. So knowing this, for us to be successful, we knew we had to basically form a habits that were going to stick. So again, this was not about rolling out a tool and getting people to start to punch in prompts. This was about really making sure that people were embracing and integrating this into their ways of working. So here's some stats. We think we did pretty good, as you can see here. So these are our year one stats in terms of how we did. We had phenomenal adoption, and we had a lot of tools available to us across the Copilot suite in 365, but we also had like OpenAI and like ChatGPT and GitHub. So we had the OpenAI, and then we continue to progress. We have every model available to us within the organization. So we're really proud and excited about what we've accomplished here with these stats. And while, yes, our change strategy and how we overcame our barriers played a factor, we do need to give credit to the fact that Visa is already a company that is comfortable with innovation and also has a lot of AI already incorporated into the workflows. But I just share this with you here so you can really see that we had almost every single person in the company who had Gen AI available to them. They adopted it and were using it on a pretty regular basis. And that continues to be true all the way into our third year. One of the things that was really valuable for us, and I wanted to make sure that I took some time to share this, is basically how we governed this work. So again, like I said before, we were asked in the Enterprise Transformation Office to incubate this. We we didn't have an AI office. We had like someone who was head of cybersecurity. We had someone who, our CIO, who is head of like all of the productivity tools for the company. We had our chief technology officer who kind of oversaw both those leaders. But we did, and even still today, we don't necessarily have a like central AI. We're not organized and we don't operate in a command and control. So for those of you who have organizations where you're a little bit more command and control, and you have like you have a chief operating officer, and you're organized more centrally, you probably are having an easier time doing the rollout and being able to govern. For us, we are a very fragmented organization. We operate in over 90 different countries, and our leaders are globally distributed across all of those offices. And then the way we operate is all through matrix organization. So that's the way we govern. So for those of you who are highly matrixed or highly distributed, you might find this interesting. And at the end of the day, and again, we didn't count perfectly, but we think somewhere between 1,200 and 1,300 people were basically all working together under our direction. So all of us pointing, behind the same arrow. And we were directing all of those individuals as part of this overall governance model. It was very effective. And I think one of the key reasons for why we saw such great adoption right out of the gate. The steering committee was the group that took care of all those tough questions that many of you are probably dealing with today. What is the risk to uploading recordings into a model? Can people do that? Can we record? How do we structure our data? How should we be thinking about export controls for those of you who maybe operate in countries where that is a concern? We had to deal with that. What tools do we make available, and how quickly should we be making those available? What is our risk profile? So that's what the executive steering committee worked on. These were all P&L owners, very senior people in the organization that we navigated and met with weekly, if not twice a week, to really make sure that we were pushing things forward. Then we had the working team. This was the nuts and bolts. This was everyone who was around the products. So basically, feature updates, roadmaps, quickly, and a very agile delivery, making sure that we were delivering a great experience and we were enabling the company to be able to use the tools. So this is kind of outside of the overall cultural transformation work that I'll talk about in a bit. So this was basically all the engineers, everyone that you would typically work with when you were doing a tool or a technology deployment. And then we had a pile of partners. And our partners here, they were really helping us either, with advisory, or helping us with amplification, or really just making sure that the system and the engine and everything kept running. And this includes the various change agents that I'm going to talk about in a bit. So I know I spent a lot of time on this, but I wanted to really give you guys a sense of just how incredibly important it is to have a governance model, and to be very intentional and thoughtful about and how you organize the various groups of leaders and partners for success. Now, having said all of that, we absolutely bumped into all sorts of barriers and had our own lessons learned along the way. We made mistakes, of course, just like anyone who is on this journey, because AI is literally changing on a daily basis. So as I already mentioned before, at the very heart of this, we knew this is a shift in behavior. This is a shift in mindset. And I think the key lesson that we learned, and we saw this pretty early on in our pilot. So for those of you who are piloting, when we get later into the Q&A, I'll be curious to see if you're also seeing this. But what we were finding is that not only do people need to completely rethink the way they approach their work and have to start to now work with think about working with an assistant who walks with them all day long. But we were also recognizing that for each person individually, they have a different driver and a different barrier to adopt Gen AI. And this was like our big aha of like, oh, wow, we're not going to be able to do this like other types of cultural transformations where maybe you can be a little bit more top down. This is really going to have to be at a very local level. And that ended up being the just basically the full like anchor for our overall change strategy, and how we basically kind of went to market with our change program. So with that, I'm about to jump into overcoming barriers. But before we do that, I'd love to do one more poll just to kind of get a sense of where people are. So Julianne, if you can get that up and running, I would love to know, what is the biggest barrier in Gen AI adoption that you're seeing in your organization? And Julianne, you're still there, yes?
Yeah, yeah, I'm still
Okay,
there.
okay. I was like,
I
all the
launched the
silence. I
poll
was
and
like,
all
oh
that.
no. I was like, for the last 10 minutes, I've been talking to nobody. I thought,
No, we have an audience too. We've
Okay,
got people
excellent.
responding to the poll, so it's good.
Perfect. Okay, that's great.
Amazing. So yeah, we'll give people a few more seconds to respond, and
Okay,
then I'll give a readout of those results.
perfect. Perfect.
I was sitting in rapt attention. Alrighty, let's share out those results. So, for what is the biggest barrier to Gen AI adoption you're seeing in your organization? So, the largest response, 29%, is unclear use cases, followed,
Yes.
yeah, followed by 19% not enough time to learn, 18% data security or privacy, 17% is limited skills to use prompts or build bots slash agents, and then followed by 10% limited awareness of tools. And then at the very end, 8% is lack of leadership buy-in.
Oh, bummer. The lack of leadership buy-in is a very hard barrier to overcome. Maybe we can talk about that in the Q&A. All right, that is great. Thank you for sharing where you all are. I think we can address most of them. We faced all of those same barriers early on in our journey. So I'll talk through that, and anything that I haven't clarified enough in my initial remarks, then certainly drop something into the chat, and we can talk about it during the Q&A. All right. So where we spent a lot of time right at the beginning was really getting clear on the value proposition. So again, we weren't thinking about this as a normal tool deployment, because when you're doing like a normal tool deployment, even a large ERP like a Workday or Oracle or SAP, a lot of times you're like, oh, it's a better experience, or you might be able to work faster. It's going to save you time, right? Like typically that's what you would do for your value prop, right? Your WIFM. In this case, we really knew, because we had to get people to rewire their brains, we focused on finding those value propositions that were true, that we could verify, and fit in with our culture. So for you, your value propositions may be completely different than what you're seeing here on the page. What I wanted to share with you is just the fact that we spent a lot of time really thinking about this, testing some of these with various people in the organization when we were still piloting, and obviously working with our various communications partners on this. And then we anchored our use cases, our key messages, all of the campaign work that I'm about to talk about on these value propositions so that we could bring them to life. And our intention was to get our employees to be saying things like what you see on the right, which is so that basically they were observing for themselves that Gen AI was helping them to save time, or was helping them to be more innovative, or was helping them to deliver more value to their clients, or helping them to differentiate themselves or Visa in the market. So I can't emphasize enough of how important it is to really take the time to work on the value proposition. I think with AI, more so than anything else, the WIFM is incredibly important, because then it's going to drive all of your key messages and even potentially the content that you're going to create. Then I think I was saying, some people, like a lot of people were saying, they're not really sure about like the good use cases. Here's the way we thought about it, because this is absolutely a big obstacle. we basically took the time to really understand what is the strength of each of the tools. Now, if you only have one or two in your organization, then it's a little bit easier. Now, for us, we had everything in the beginning, we were kind of focusing on just the three: the GitHub, the ChatGPT, and the Copilot on the 365 platform. But in that first year, we had Gemini became available. Like, we now have Grok and Claude, and we have the Copilot on Dynamics, and more and more. I mean, we have just dozens and dozens. So where we had to really focus is, what is the strength of that particular AI tool? So, like, what's the strength of Gemini versus what's the strength of OpenAI's ChatGPT versus Copilot? And then what is it that various roles are trying to do? And this is incredibly important because, again, our whole focus was at the local level, and we realized that each individual is going to have to find their use case and really to get over those barriers. So we then identified the use cases that then we had that really great overlap in this Venn diagram of: use ChatGPT for this if you are this kind of role. Like, that's the kind of language that we would use in our content or communications. If you're a salesperson, use use ChatGPT to do your client prospecting, because the data is up to date. You've got the latest internet, and it's really, really good at synthesis and summarization. So that's the way we kind of overcame the use case barrier. Now, finding the use cases is a challenge, and I'll get to how we use change agents to help us identify those use cases in just a minute. And then we brought all of this to life at a local level through these different prongs of the program. So we really leveraged our leaders. So I'll talk about that in a minute. We had two very active and strong change agent communities that we managed. And then we used the employee campaign to amplify everything. And then we used employee moments as a way to kind of make everything stick and get integrated into the flow of work. So all of these I'm going to talk about in a lot more detail in just a moment. So let's do that. All right. So let's start first with awareness. And we did awareness all through storytelling. And the way I want to start first is how we thought about our enablement campaigns and the amplification. As you know, right, in your own experience, right, AI, Gen AI in particular, it's changing on a daily basis. And now with agentic, I mean, it's even changing even more rapidly than it was in late 2023 and all throughout 2024. And so what we did is we basically set up 11-week enablement campaigns. Now, looking in hindsight, we probably even should have made those shorter, but we were really working more quarter on a quarter basis, and then really focusing on what's the theme that we need in this first quarter. Let's put the whole that whole set of campaign together. We're going to focus on this one idea. We're really going to tie in maybe one or two of the value propositions. And then we anchored that 11 weeks to something big that was happening in the company at the time. So we had a hackathon that happened early in 2024. We had a prompt competition that happened late in 2024. We would have, town halls and things like that were at a global basis, where we could then anchor that big event to that campaign. And that really helped with the amplification that was needed to really drive the awareness around the company. And then a lot of the content was peer led and peer created. So we used our change agents to help us with this, and we also encouraged our employees to get involved and to provide their use cases. And we created a forum and a platform for them to be able to do that and share that. So that also helped to drive awareness quite a bit. And the last thing that I'll say here about the awareness is how we involved our leaders. So Visa, as I mentioned before, we're about a company of 34,000, something like that. We're globally distributed, 90 plus markets. And then with that, we have about 300 most senior leaders. These are the leaders who have P&L accountability. They're distributed everywhere across the company. And but all of those leaders were expected to carry forward that OKR that I shared earlier on. And so what we did is we engaged with those 300 leaders. We approached them, and then we established for them clear expectations of what their job was as a leader. So we essentially gave them their change sponsorship toolkit without calling it change sponsorship. But we basically said, like, hey, kind of here's your contract. Like, you're expected as a leader to help ensure Visa achieves their OKR by doing A, B, and C. So we laid that out for them, and we had the leadership buy-in and support. So I'm real bummed for those folks of you who have that, don't have the leadership support, because it's very, very, very challenging if you don't have that. So we were able to get our CEO to bring together those 300 individuals and reinforce the importance of meeting that OKR on a call that he does on a regular basis with those leaders. So that opened the door for us to say, hey, here's how we're going to help you. Here's what you're the role you're going to play. And then every 2 months we would give them a toolkit, kind of a meeting in a box, and with all sorts of content that they can use. So we would give them day in the life. So if they were a sales leader, they would get the day in the life of what it's like for a salesperson. We would share with them quick win use cases, and then also very very specific talking points and things that they could do so that they could sponsor the change and also drive awareness for their teams. And then next around is capability. So I did, Julianne had said that some of you are also saying that one of your biggest barriers is around the capability development. And that is no joke. It is very challenging for people to rewire their brains. We have been using Google search for what, 20, 25, might even be 30 years. I don't even know. Someone can put it into the chat when Google was first available. So I can't remember. But that's what we're used to doing. Keyword search really fast, and then we go in and dig in ourselves. And the giant learning curve is completely rethinking, and you're now having a conversation with somebody who's really smart. And so getting people to understand that a prompt is not a keyword, like 5 keyword question. It's 5 sentences, and you're really describing what you want and the kind of output that you want, and being very clear on your objective and your outcome and what data to use. And so that requires quite a bit of reinforcement with people. And then the second big barrier that we also were addressing from a capability basis was the actual use case. So, hey, you're a communications person and you need to write a press release. Here's the tool and the set of prompts for you to use. And you're a salesperson and you need to do prospecting. Here's the tool you should use and the types of prompts that you can use. That's the content that we were creating, but getting that out there is the big challenge. So we used 2 change agent groups to really help us through that. So the first was what we called our Gen AI points of contact. So as I mentioned, we had those 300 leaders, and the intention was that they're supposed to carry forward that OKR. In that first year, about 70% carried forward that OKR, and so about 70% of them actually engaged with us and gave us a point of contact. Now, nowadays, because we're in our 3rd year of the journey, we have like 100% of our leaders have an OKR that's tied to AI specifically. So what those point of contacts did for us is they helped us identify what the key barriers were for the people in their organization. And again, because a lot of these people, their organizations were globally distributed, it was very hard for us to get that information. So they were able to capture that for us and really understand, what are your people trying to do? What are the workflows that really irritate them the most? Where is it that they really want to be more innovative? Where is it that they want to be more productive? And so that helped us identify where we needed to focus and what content to put together for them. And these Gen AI points of contact were not AI experts. They just were someone in the organization who had influence and had the ear of the leader. The people who are the experts were our Gen AI ambassadors. And these were people who were invited to basically go on a journey, get educated in Gen AI, and then get badged, which was a great, is still today is a great honor. In that first year, we had about 500 or 600 badged Gen AI ambassadors. We now have over 1,900. And what these ambassadors do for us is they're doing on the ground peer to peer learning. So these guys are globally distributed. So if they happen to be in the Malaysia office where we have, not a huge workforce, but they're sitting there, then they could then demo the different products. They could show prompts actually in action. Nowadays, they're showing like how you can actually build an agent for those people who are interested. So that was a great way for how we overcame that learning barrier, and that first initial personal touch really helped people kind of get over that barrier, being nervous, being worried about doing something wrong, or like also being worried about putting themselves out of a job, which is a very, very common fear that people have. And then with that, we complemented that with a lot of digital and on-demand learning. So our L&D organization, which is called VC University, they created a whole destination with a set of learning pathways that were targeted. So if you were in sales, you had a certain learning pathway. If you were more of a general knowledge worker, you had a pathway. And then if you were more of a technical person, a software developer, you had a different kind of pathway. So we did segment those learning pathways by stakeholder type, and that really helped us overcome the learning barrier. And then another key thing that these ambassadors did for us is they helped us build the prompt library. Because that is one of the key barriers, especially early on, is like, how do I even write a prompt? And we did have in our learning assets like a prompt formula, which like Microsoft makes available to you if you want to use, and then we kind of adapted it for ourselves. And but then the ambassadors and the Gen AI points of contact were able to feed to us various prompts that people were having success with. And we fed that into something that was then available to all employees. And then lastly, here's about reinforcement. Right, you can't have a change stick unless you're reinforcing it in some fashion. And so, of course, we use both sticks and carrots in order to make that work. So let me start with the carrots, because that's the better thing, right? So with carrots, we definitely focused a lot on recognition and reward, all the things that can make people like feel good, have, kind of like pat themselves on their back and things like that. So the Gen AI ambassadors get badged. That was one of our carrots. They're badged. People know they're badged. Their badge is visible, digitally, and they're recognized for that. And they're often like, yeah, mentioned, by various leaders in forums. So they get a lot of carrots that way. But in addition to them, there's just regular folks who are not badged Gen AI ambassadors who are trailblazing and really helping the organization continue to push forward and be leaders in AI. So we created a reward that's in our platform. We call them uplifts. So I'm sure many of you have like an online platform where you can give people points and recognize them, for a great job. So we created a Gen AI trailblazer, and so many employees have been recognized that way. And then we also, within those various meetings in a box for our leaders, we also created space for them to do shout outs. So we just basically we created that platform and set it up for them, and then they could bring in that shout out where it made sense. So if a team had like just produced a use case with us and had seen tremendous amount of productivity uplift or some time savings or whatever it might be, they would showcase that as well. And then for the sticks, we really then tied it into three things. We tied it into the OKRs, really reinforcing that OKR, having that reported every quarter, not only at the global town hall, but within those leaders' town halls. And then we also incorporated into the employee moments to really have those be reminders. So this was things like, hey, you're having to do your quarterly your quarterly conversation with your manager. Here's a great prompt to get you ready for that. Oh, you're getting ready to do your annual review with your employee. Here's a great prompt to get you ready for that. You're doing your OKR setting for fiscal 25. Here's a great prompt for doing that. So we would incorporate AI, and it's all over the place now. Where you see little AI icons, and people will say, like, here's a little tip for how you can leverage AI in this particular employee moment. And then the last way we did the carrot was in the dashboard and the listening. And here we made it available to the SVPs, those P&L owners, as well as the points of contact. They had access and visibility to all of the adoption and utilization of the tools. And so we made that very visible, both what was happening all across Visa and what their organization was doing specifically. And then we did do listening through the points of contact and through the ambassadors. We listened to them. We had regular conversations with them, hearing on the ground what was happening. And then we did do 2 surveys. I'm not a huge fan of surveys, but in this case, we did have to get some sense of perception of like what kind of productivity uplift and things like that they were getting. So we did do 2 surveys, and we ran them through the POCs so that and then the reward that they got is that if they got enough people in the organization to respond, then we would do a cut of the data for their organization. And that ended up really resulting in great response rate, which was cool. I can't share the actual content with you. This is the best I can do. Legal was like, no, can't share all of that content. So it's kind of a bummer. I really wanted to show you guys how we visualized a lot of our campaign. But here's just a couple things. They were willing to let me at least share a few things. But this is how we brought it to life. This is how we really made sure that it was, bringing the use cases to life, really making it applicable, how we made things employee driven. So you can see here the Gen AI in action. That's an employee who's specifically done a demo. We try to make everything very practical. So like I said, we had real life use cases. We had these day in the life for many, all the different kinds of roles. So a day in the life for someone in sales, a day in the life for someone in finance. And as I mentioned already before, we had the meeting in the box. So all of that really made it very easy for leaders to sponsor the change. So with that, we really think that local and relevant strategy was very helpful in our success. We also think that because we really engage the employees as part of the adoption and to really have them buy in, and have them be providing what's working for them, that helped accelerate and also made it much easier for people to feel like they had the freedom to explore, maybe, and maybe fail or try something and have it not work. So we do think that this had a lot to do with why we were successful in our adoption. And so with that, and looking at the time, I'm just going to pop into this last little section about Agentic, and then I want to make sure we leave us a good amount of time for some questions if you guys have some. So with Agentic, and I know for some of you, you're like, wow, we're like just trying to get people to adopt Copilot. So I get it. But Agentic's here, and there's a lot of hype around Agentic right now. And so we're approaching this the same, very, very similar to the way we approached all the hype that was happening late 2023 and early 2024. We're focusing on exploration. And so what we have available for our workforce is we have a Gen AI hub now. So, and on that Gen AI hub, when you go in there, you can access every single model. So you can have the chat bot, it has every single model. And then you can make your own chat bot using whichever model you want. And then you can also go and build your own agent. And so that's how we're getting just employees kind of focusing on that exploration on their own and really kind of keeping that same spirit going in the world of Agentic. And then in addition to that, we really are focusing on the quick wins and really getting leaders engaged. Here we're doing a pretty heavy stick. I'm actually quite excited about this because for Visa, we based on our culture, we don't use a lot of sticks, or we haven't historically. I've been here 14 years, so I'm actually very excited as someone who's kind of more into operational excellence and continuous improvement and all that. I really like sticks. So for us, we have a very tight stick, both two ways. One is there's an OKR that's much tighter, much more focused on productivity and efficiency gains, more so than anything that we've had in the past. And then two, we are P&L owners that we've talked about before have a new type of efficiency target that they've never had before. And the intention of that efficiency target is for them to be thinking, like to step back and really think about the way they're operating and to identify those quick wins with leveraging AI that's going to make them more productive, more efficient, delivering more value for their clients. And for a lot, for most of these, the intention is that they need to try to find a way to self fund those ideas. Now, some of them they've like raised them up. Like we did do a whole thing of like, hey, what are some of the biggest opportunities we have to deliver value for our clients or to really unlock? And those are being managed more, within our technology organization because they have the enterprise wide impact. But within just the team, they're identifying those quick wins. Now we have a unique advantage here in that we're a growth company, and so right, we're seeing so many companies out there today, laying thousands of people off in the hopes of agentic. Because we're a growth company, that's not what we have to do. We're not forced to do that. There's no pressure for us to do that. So for us, we can really focus on how do you want to think differently about where and how you're going to be hiring in the future, in the world of thinking about agentic and AI. So you can slow your growth down as a way to kind of meet that efficiency target while you're rolling out various agentic solutions. So that's the way we're kind of approaching it from a platform and exploration perspective. From a capability perspective, we're continuing to do exactly what we've done before. We still have the ambassadors; they're 3 times the size now, and then we also keep expanding our Visa University platform, where there's a lot more learning there around agentic. But something we're doing unique this year is that we've also identified some key skills that are actually going to help our organization be even stronger within all this change and all of the disruption that's happening with AI and agentic. So these are some of the key skills that are built into our OKRs and like our focus areas for capability development across the company. And then the last thing I'll share with you is the way in the world of agentic, the way we're kind of thinking about the impact. And so I mentioned before, right, like people in manufacturing and semiconductor and even in tech, like you were just, Meta just announced the other day, right? So there's all these people, all these companies that are laying people off. And one of the things that I think we need to start to do as change leaders, especially those of us who are involved in AI in particular, is to really think differently about the definition of ROI, especially in the world of agentic. It's not just about cost cutting. And so the way we think about this at Visa is we think about it more around productivity. So can you get the same number of people to be faster at executing the same or more work? Can you get the same people to do more work with less effort? So can they do it at a lower cost? Can they do it with less mental or physical exertion, whatever it might be? And then quality. Can the same people do the same work but at a higher quality? Can we get better scores from our clients? Can we have higher satisfaction? Can we get bigger deals? And this is the way that we think about productivity. So when the leaders are given that efficiency target, and really looking at their agentic solutions, they're not just looking at it from how can I cut costs. They're looking at how can I be more value to my client? How can I grow smart? and continue to do the work and deliver that value. So I'm shared this with you as just as a way to maybe potentially rethink, because I know a lot of executives today are really focusing on the cost cutting. And so with that, I will close up my remarks, and and it's perfect because I've got the dry throat now. So I'll just share with you a few words of wisdom, and then we can go into some Q&A if that appeals to folks. So start first with those quick wins. Really find those use cases that are going to deliver the immediate value. Look at the use cases by, matching the tool with what the different kinds of roles that are happening. So really think about how you want to segment out your employee base. So you're looking at the different types of work that they're doing and identify those use cases. Build that capability in the prompt writing, and using and having an interaction with AI and leverage change agents to do that. This is really, really critical for people to shift from that keyword search to basically that conversation with like a smart person, like a Harvard professor or someone like that. And then activate from every corner of your organization. And so if you're just a US based organization, think about like where how you're distributed, how many offices you're in, where are the people located, and then what makes sense for you in terms of setting up and organizing your change agents. So with that, I will stop sharing, and we can do some Q&A if that works for folks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stacey. Such a great presentation. So I've been collecting everyone's questions, and we've had a lot of questions. So some of the questions are a bit related. I'm going to put them together so that we do a bit of a
Okay.
two-in-one in some of the questions. So let's start off with Sarah's question. How did you prioritize where to implement Gen AI? We are prioritizing time savings in phase one and are stuck trying to quantify each use case, which seems like a large effort in and of itself.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is a great question. And again, I would even say that in our early days, that was kind of what our hypothesis was as well, of like, oh, this was all about time savings. Um, so what we did is some early pilots right away. So we did some early pilots with GitHub for our developers, and they were using both GitHub and ChatGPT. And then we asked them to kind of do a pros and cons of like which one was giving you the best uplift. And these were fast pilots. We're talking about like 4 weeks, super, super fast pilots. Then we did the same thing with Copilot, and we asked for a cross section of people from various roles. And so like a couple of things that popped up really quick in that 4 week pilot with Copilot right away, is that we learned that communications people really, really had a strong use case with ChatGPT, and sales had a really strong use case with ChatGPT. And then we also saw right away that we didn't have good use case with finance. That especially at the time in 2024, these tools just were not sophisticated enough to do any kind of financial modeling or even to do like basic Excel stuff. So we were just really clear, like, hey, finance, there's not really a good use case unless you want to do your meeting summaries or something like that. That was like a universal use case. So we would focus on the big, broad, enterprise-wide universal use cases, such as like summarize your meetings, record your meetings, do your notes that way, manage your calendar, that kind of stuff. And then we focused in on where in those early pilots we saw excitement. So like communications, marketing, sales, those kinds of roles.
Thank you. And the next question is from Maduri and also from Antoinette. So I am sure there were a lot of uh-oh moments, especially early on, which helped you make pivots. Would love to hear a story or two. And what do you think you might have missed out on the first year of execution?
It's a really great question. One of our big uh-oh moments was the Copilot license is very expensive. Most of you probably know that if you've ventured down that. And even though we secured a really good deal, we we didn't deploy to everybody. We didn't get 35,000 licenses. We got a smaller number, and that actually created a lot of friction for us in our ability to drive adoption, because then we had a bunch of people on a waiting list. So we had a bunch of people who had Copilot where we didn't quite know if they had like a good use case yet. And so we had like 500 licenses locked up for 60 days with a group of people who weren't using it and finding any value. But meanwhile, we had 500 or 800 people on a waiting list who wanted that. And so I would say, don't do that. and and certainly find, maybe take the time first to really focus in on where, either get the universal global license if you can afford it, and then focus in on where the groups that have the most value. So because we kind of did it more of, we distributed to everybody but software developers and finance and a couple other groups, and it didn't pan out well for us.
Thank you, Stacey. So we have a question from Kitty, Tiffany, and Maduri, all ending in I's or Y. So this is more about leadership. So when the CEO made the call to action for AI, how did he or she communicate the why? And also, what have you found to be critical capabilities from leadership to ensure that they drive adoption and enablement? Is it based on their own usage of Gen AI? Can you talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So our CEO was all about better value to our clients and being faster. I mean, this is where he has been really focusing coming out of the pandemic, because, like the world slowed down a bit. And then when we came out of the pandemic, like I mean, literally we're still sprinting, right? At least it feels like we've been sprinting, for the last 2 years. It's been pretty wild. Um, and so he basically was like, we need to be faster than the market, and we need to deliver great value to our clients. And so so said two things. I want us to be a leader in Gen AI. That I want that to be a differentiator for us as Visa, because we're already a leader in AI. And I wanted us to do it in a way where we can be, more efficient, more productive, and greater value. So that really helped, that he said that was very, very valuable for us, that he set it up like that, versus some of the other CEOs who are doing it as a cost cutting. You're not going to talk about that publicly to your whole company. They like, oh, we're trying to eliminate, 20% of our workforce. That's not going to be appealing and insightful. So we did have that luxury. And then what we asked leaders to do, like I said, we did kind of create their meetings in the box, and we outlined their role. So we basically taught them how to be change sponsors. And as you saw, we now have capability where we've outlined a capability around change leadership as part of our overall business adaptability. But that's just new for the last year. In 2023, 2024, like change management, change leadership was like a dirty word within Visa. So we basically taught them how to be change sponsors without telling them they were being change sponsors. So in that meeting in the box, we had a spot where, please tell us what use case you're using. Please fill this out and show your day in the life of how you're using these various AI tools. Or if it's not you, have one of the people on your organization then do a demo and showcase. And we had really good pickup. Like I said, maybe it was around 70 or so percent of our leaders were on a regular basis every quarter engaging with their employees and talking about the importance of AI, the importance of the OKR, and then either demoing and their own use of AI, or most of them usually, they would talk a little bit about like, oh, I'm doing my Friday synthesis, and then they would pass it over to a couple people in their teams who would then do like a real nice demo of how they were using the various tools.
Thank you, Stacey. We have a question from
Yeah.
Eliza on how did you find and source your Gen AI ambassadors?
Oh yeah, great question. You know what? They came flooding. But initially what we did is we had those people who were involved in the pilots. A lot of the people who were involved in those pilots were volunteered by the leaders. So again, we were able to do quite a bit of a top down effort where so we had maybe, I don't know, let's just say we had like maybe 100 people who were in the GitHub pilot, and maybe we had another 100 or 150 who were doing Chat GPT, and then we had like 150 or so that were doing Copilot. And we invited all of those people to become ambassadors. We had really good pickup there. And then we just announced it to the company. So as part of our amplification, so when we announced that we were making Copilot available, when we announced that, like, hey, we have this Gen AI hub and there's Chat GPT, it's open to the entire company. In that announcement that was done from, our most senior executives, from our like chief technology officer and our chief administration officer, who also leads people, um, we talked about the fact that we were looking for ambassadors, or do you want to learn? Because the reward for them was that you're going to get badged and you're going to get a front row seat with Microsoft. You're going to get to engage and talk to Microsoft about what they're doing in Copilot. We're going to get to influence their roadmap. We're going to get to give immediate feedback to OpenAI for the roadmap, because we do have these really nice partnerships with these big companies. And so that was very enticing for people in our company, because we do have this culture of wanting to be innovative. We set very high standards. So for the people where that appealed to, they like signed up. So it wasn't difficult for us to get that, like 500 or so, 600 people globally distributed within a matter of months.
Thank you, Stacey. We've got one last
Yeah.
question due to the time, and there's
Yeah.
so many great questions. So we have one question from Jennifer. Did you feel like your tech leaders bought into starting with the human focus approach? And if so, how did you get them there instead of solely focusing on tech innovation and deployment?
Yeah. Short answer is no. They were not focused on the human-centered approach when we were first engaging with them. Uh, I uh, I did it by becoming very, very good friends and really good partners with those various leaders who were building out these tools. Because again, they're engineers and they wanted to focus on the latest technology and capability. They were also hyper focused on security, which makes sense. Right, really making sure that we're protecting Visa's data. So what I brought to them was what we were hearing from our points of contact all across the world and our ambassadors, and then again, I just did it like, hey, how do we make this work? We're hearing from our salespeople that they want to be able to access XYZ data. Can we make that work? Or we're hearing from our employees that they're really struggling with the user interface. Can we get into your next sprint like some improvement into the UI? And I'm making it sound kind of easy, but it did. In some cases, it took months to get like especially the user interface improved, or and to also get like some of the data quality improved and things like that. But I just they were part of my working team, and they were all matrix. None of them worked for me directly, but I just established a relationship with them and said, as a company, we need to achieve this OKR, and let's do it right. And so for the most part, I would say 90% of them engaged with me in a positive way, and we worked together to improve the experience.
Well said. Thank you so much, Stacey. Thank you, everyone, for joining our presentation today. And yeah, this was an absolutely amazing hour.
Well, it's great. Thank you so much for the time. I wish I could have answered all of the questions. Julianne, maybe we can figure out something we can do after the fact if it's possible. So, but we
Yep.
can talk about that later. All right,
Awesome.
great.
Thank you
Thank you
guys.
so much. All right, take care.